After abdicating in 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte is sent into exile on Elba, a tiny island meant to be a political cage disguised as mercy. Europe breathes out. Kings return to thrones, diplomats gather at the Congress of Vienna to redraw borders, and France is handed back to the Bourbon monarchy under Louis XVIII. On paper, the age of Napoleon is over, but peace is fragile, and it doesn't take long for cracks to show. In France, the restored monarchy feels like a rewind to an era many people despise. Old privileges, old arrogance, old faces returning to power as if the revolution never happened. Soldiers who once marched under the tricolor watch their status shrink. Veterans feel forgotten. Ordinary citizens sense that the nation's future is being decided by outsiders and aristocrats, not by the people who bled through 20 years of war. And on Elba, Napoleon listens. Rumors reach him like sparks carried by the wind. France is restless. The army is unhappy. The Bourbons are unpopular. Meanwhile, in Vienna, his enemies, the very alliance that crushed him, argue bitterly over spoils and influence. The coalition is strong, but not united. Napoleon understands something most rulers forget too late. History doesn't end when the victor says it does. It ends when the defeated stop moving, so he gambles everything on speed and shock. In early 1815, Napoleon slips past the nets meant to trap him. He lands in France with only a small band, marching inland as royal forces rush to arrest him. Then the moment comes that turns a fugitive into a force of nature. Troops sent to stop him hesitate, and instead rally to him. The spell is broken. Word spreads faster than orders. One regiment becomes two become thousands. The emperor is not returning. He is being pulled back by a country that cannot decide whether it fears him or needs him. In Vienna, panic replaces debate. Rival diplomats stop haggling and start mobilizing. The coalition declares Napoleon an outlaw. No negotiations, no compromise, only elimination. Armies are summoned, alliances reforged, the map of Europe put on hold. Because everyone understands the same terrifying truth. If Napoleon is allowed time, he will turn France into a weapon again. And time is the one thing they cannot afford to give him. Napoleon understands the problem with brutal clarity. On paper, his return is spectacular, but strategically, it is a trap. France can raise an army quickly, and his name still carries magnetic power. Yet the coalition has something he does not. Depth. Austria, Russia, Prussia, Britain, and their allies can feed the battlefield with men and money for months. If their armies converge and press from multiple directions, France will be crushed by sheer weight. Napoleon doesn't need to be beaten in one dramatic battle. He can be slowly strangled, and that more than any single enemy commander is what he fears. So he chooses a plan built on speed, deception, and separation, the same logic that carried him through his greatest campaigns. He will not wait behind France's borders while the coalition organizes a coordinated invasion. He will strike first, and he will strike where the enemy is closest and most exposed. The quickest path to victory runs north, into Belgium, where two major coalition forces are camped within marching distance of France. The Prussian army under the hard-driving veteran Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher, and the Anglo-Allied army under the Duke of Wellington, an uneasy mix of British regulars, Dutch-Belgian troops, and German contingents. Separately, each is formidable. Together they are fatal. Napoleon's aim is not simply to win battles, it is to prevent the right battles from happening. If Blücher and Wellington can link up, they can form a united front and hold him in place until larger coalition armies arrive. Napoleon would then face an expanding ring of steel. Therefore, he must create confusion and force choices, make one army retreat, make the other hesitate, and keep them from sharing information quickly enough to coordinate. The entire operation depends on tempo. Every hour matters. Belgium offers the perfect stage for this kind of war. The region is laced with roads that funnel armies toward critical crossroads, points that decide whether forces can support each other or remain isolated. Napoleon pushes his army across the frontier near Charleroi, driving a wedge between the Prussians to the east and Wellington to the west. It's a classic maneuver. Insert his army like a blade, then pivot to cut each opponent separately. He divides his own forces into wings under trusted marshals, intending to pin one enemy in place while he smashes the other with his main strength. He also counts on psychology. Napoleon knows his enemies respect him enough to overreact. A sudden French surge into Belgium threatens Brussels, threatens supply lines, threatens political confidence. It pressures Wellington to defend quickly and pressures Blücher to stand firm. Two different instincts that can pull them apart. If Napoleon can trigger that split and exploit it immediately, he can win a quick, spectacular victory that changes the political math overnight. A defeated coalition might reconsider the cost of total war. A shaken Britain might hesitate. A battered Prussia might be forced to retreat. Napoleon's dream is not endless fighting. It is a short, violent campaign that ends with him negotiating from strength. But the gamble is razor thin. His army is experienced yet not invincible. Many troops are veterans, but the system around him is less stable than in earlier years, and his marshals do not always share his precision. Worse, the coalition has learned from the past. They know that Napoleon's most dangerous weapon is separation. That means they will fight to unite, even if it costs them dearly. In Belgium, Napoleon is racing against the one outcome he cannot survive. Two armies, one battlefield, one combined blow.
Ney's assignment seems straightforward on paper but brutal in execution. Seize the crossroads at Quatre Bras and hold it. That junction is more than a patch of road. It's the hinge of the campaign. Control it, and Wellington can't easily support Blücher. Lose it, and the Anglo-Allied army can slide east to link up with the Prussians. Napoleon's plan depends on Ney moving fast, hitting hard, and locking Wellington in place before the coalition can coordinate. But Quatre Bras is chaos. Wellington's forces are still assembling, units arriving piecemeal, some unsure of the larger situation, many of them a mixed coalition of nationalities and experience levels. Ney strikes with urgency, throwing French infantry forward to punch through before the defenders can solidify. At moments, it looks like the French might overwhelm the crossroads. Then, new Allied troops appear, buying time at the edge of the line, counterattacking in sudden bursts, refusing to collapse. The fighting becomes a brutal tug of war, fields and hedges taken, lost, and taken again. Ney keeps trying to force a decisive break, yet the pressure never becomes a clean, crushing blow. The Allies bend, but they don't snap. There's also a structural problem: command timing and commitment. Ney's attacks come in waves, but not always with the full weight needed to smash a position quickly. As the hours pass, the window for an easy victory closes. Wellington, reading the battlefield with cold instinct, understands the crossroads must not fall. He feeds in reserves as they arrive, strengthening the defense just enough to keep Ney from turning the struggle into a rout. By late day, Quatre Bras remains contested but unbroken. Ney has inflicted pain, but he hasn't achieved the one thing Napoleon needs: a decisive breakthrough that pins Wellington in place and prevents him from reacting to events elsewhere. Because elsewhere, Napoleon is fighting Blücher at Ligny, and there, the Emperor gets what he wants. At Ligny, Napoleon brings his main force down on the Prussian army with the intent to crack it before Wellington can intervene. The battle is savage, close range, and punishing, a grinding contest of artillery, infantry columns, and stubborn defense. Blücher is no timid opponent. Though elderly, he is aggressive to the point of recklessness, personally leading a cavalry charge and nearly being captured when his horse is shot beneath him. The Prussians fight hard, but Napoleon's concentration of force tells. By the end of the day, the Prussian line buckles. Blücher is forced to retreat. Yet this is the crucial twist: defeat does not equal destruction. The Prussian army withdraws battered, shaken, but still coherent. It has not been shattered into scattered fragments. It has not been erased as a fighting force. That distinction, often invisible in the smoke of battle, will matter more than any single hill or farm. Napoleon, believing momentum is everything, orders Marshal Grouchy to pursue the retreating Prussians. The goal is clear: keep Blücher running, Keep him away from Wellington, keep the two coalition armies separated long enough for Napoleon to finish the campaign. If Grouchy can stay glued to the Prussian rear, harass their march, and prevent them from turning back, then Ligny becomes the first act of a masterpiece. One enemy beaten, the other isolated. But the chase that follows is where certainty begins to leak away. Pursuit sounds simple. In reality, it's fog, mud, broken roads, and incomplete intelligence. The Prussians are retreating, but in which direction and with what intention? If they fall back toward their own lines, Napoleon gets his wish. If they pivot toward Wellington, then Ligny becomes a dangerous almost. And in war, almost can be the most expensive word of all.
Wellington understands that Waterloo will not be a battle of flashy maneuvers. It will be a battle of endurance, of buying time, of absorbing shock, of refusing to break until help arrives. So he chooses his ground with the calm of a man who knows exactly what he needs. He places his army behind a long, gentle ridge south of Brussels, using the reverse slope as a natural shield. From the French side, the ridge hides much of Wellington's infantry from direct artillery fire. Cannonballs that would normally rake an exposed line instead crash into earth and vanish, or skim the crest with less lethal effect. It's defensive geometry, simple but decisive. He then locks his position to three strongpoints: Hougoumont on the right, La Haye Sainte in the center, and Papelotte on the left. These are not just farms. Once fortified and garrisoned with tough troops, they become anchors. Hard knots the French must either smash or work around, and either option costs time and blood. Hougoumont in particular becomes a magnet for violence. French forces keep throwing men at it, trying to pry open Wellington's right flank, and the defenders keep clinging on, room by room, wall by wall. At one point, French troops force their way through the gate, only to be trapped as the gate is slammed shut behind them, and the intruders are killed. Wellington later calls that moment decisive because it proves something early. The line will not collapse quickly, and the day will be long. Napoleon arrives facing this carefully prepared trap, but his own situation is not ideal. The night before has brought heavy rain. The ground is soft and slick, bad for artillery movement, bad for cavalry charges, bad for the speed he depends on. Napoleon chooses to wait, delaying the attack so the ground can dry and his guns can be deployed more effectively. Tactically, the delay makes sense. Strategically, it is deadly. Every lost hour is an hour the Prussians can use to march closer. When the battle begins, Napoleon probes Wellington's right at Hougoumont, part feint, part attempt to pull Allied reserves out of position. Then the French guns roar. A large cannonade pounds the ridge, hoping to soften the Allied center before the main infantry attack. Wellington's reverse slope defense blunts the worst of it, but not all. Cannonballs still find bodies. The battlefield becomes a place where men vanish in bursts of iron and smoke, where lines shrink without anyone moving. Then French infantry advances in heavy columns, dense formations built for pushing through with momentum. But Wellington's troops respond with disciplined musket volleys, cutting into the columns before they can fully deploy. At key moments, British heavy cavalry surges forward and slams into the French attack, scattering it in violent seconds. The success is thrilling and dangerous. Carried away, the cavalry rides too far, becomes disordered, and is counterattacked by French cavalry. The price is brutal. It's a pattern that repeats throughout the day: courage and momentum followed by exhaustion and punishment. As the afternoon drags on, Marshal Ney, fighting with the ferocity of a man determined to force a decision, believes he sees signs of Allied retreat. He responds with one of the most dramatic gambles of the battle: mass cavalry charges aimed at breaking Wellington's center. But Wellington's infantry is ready. They form hollow squares, bayonets bristling outward like a living fortress. Horses will not charge into a wall of steel and gunfire. The French cavalry circles, probing, looking for cracks that do not appear. They can harass, intimidate, and threaten, but without coordinated infantry and artillery support, they cannot shatter the squares. The charges burn time and men, and the battlefield fills with spent horses and scattered riders. And while the struggle rages in front, a second battle is forming to the side, one Napoleon cannot afford. Grouchy, tasked with pursuing the Prussians, is held up elsewhere. Blücher's main force slips away and marches toward the sound of the guns. In the late afternoon, Prussian units begin arriving on Napoleon's flank, pressing into villages and threatening to roll up the French position. Suddenly, Napoleon's clean plan, defeat Wellington before Prussia can intervene, starts to bleed away. He is forced to divert reserves that were meant to finish Wellington. Every battalion sent to contain the Prussians is a battalion not available for the final blow. By evening, the battlefield is a vice, tightening in opposite directions. Wellington's line is battered but still standing, his men clinging to ridge, farms, and discipline. Napoleon's attacks are fierce, but his time is running out, his reserves are draining, and the Prussian presence is growing stronger by the hour. Waterloo is no longer just a fight against Wellington. It is a race against encirclement, and a test of whether Napoleon can still bend history faster than his enemies can converge. As evening closes in, Napoleon reaches the moment every commander dreads. The instant when options shrink to a single, irreversible choice. His earlier assaults have bled Wellington's line but not broken it, and now the battlefield is tightening around him. Prussian forces are growing stronger on his flank, pushing closer with every passing minute. The French army is exhausted, the ground is littered with casualties, and the Emperor can feel the window for a clean victory slipping away. If he cannot crack Wellington's center soon, the day will end, not with negotiation but with annihilation. So Napoleon turns to the one formation that still carries an aura of inevitability, the Imperial Guard. These are not ordinary troops. They are the elite, battle-hardened veterans, symbols of the empire itself, men who have marched through Europe as the final argument in Napoleon's favor. For years, the Guard has been the last reserve, the unit held back until the decisive moment, the hammer that falls when everything else has failed. Committing them is a message to friend and enemy alike. This is the final push, and it must succeed. The Guard advances across the corpse-strewn field toward Wellington's center. For a heartbeat, it looks like the old story might repeat. Napoleon's elite moving forward with relentless confidence, the enemy about to buckle under the pressure. But Wellington's men rise at the ridge and meet them with devastating musket volleys. The Guard takes the fire, tries to press on, and then the impossible happens. The attack hesitates. The line wavers. And then, in full view of both armies, the Imperial Guard begins to fall back. That retreat is more than a tactical setback. It is psychological collapse. The Guard is supposed to be unbreakable. If they are turning back, then what hope does anyone else have? A shockwave races through the French ranks. Rumors spread instantly, encirclement, disaster, the Prussians at their rear. Units that have fought all day begin to unravel. Discipline fractures into fear. The retreat starts in pockets, then becomes a flood. Wellington senses the shift with the instinct of a seasoned commander. He orders a general advance. Allied lines surge forward, bayonets fixed, and the pressure becomes unbearable as the Prussians hammer in from the side. What might have been an organized withdrawal turns into a rout. Men run, guns are abandoned, formations dissolve into crowds trying to escape the battlefield. Napoleon himself is forced to flee, barely avoiding capture. Within days, the political reality is undeniable. He cannot raise another army in time. He surrenders to the British and is sent far away, to St. Helena, a remote Atlantic prison designed to make escape impossible. There, the legend ends in isolation. Waterloo becomes more than a battle. It is a decisive turning point, the final closure of the Napoleonic era and the beginning of a long period of relative peace between Europe's great powers. The continent is exhausted, and after Waterloo, the major states avoid direct war with one another for decades. An uneasy stability built on the shared memory of how close Europe came to being remade by one man's return.